Hi guys, this is Rebecca Kondasek and this is Conversations with the Doula. As usual, I'm going to give it like a minute or two for people to kind of come and join us. So just bear with me in a minute or two of awkward silence. Hey Haley, you're getting close. Just bear with me for another minute. Today's topic is on like when to go to the hospital, how to sort of recognize labor. I have notes today to kind of help keep me on topic because this is a topic that I definitely could talk about for hours, and there's a lot of different sort of lanes you can take it down. So I'm going to try and stay focused and keep it under like 15 minutes. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. The other videos I haven't really had notes, but this is a topic that I'm used to having in a very much like conversation form where someone sort of asks me like, okay, what happened in this scenario, and I can answer it. So this is kind of helpful for me. I wish I could be your doula too, Haley. You're gonna just have to call me when you're in labor. I'll give virtual support to your husband. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So like I said, this Conversations with the Doula today, the topic is when to go to the hospital. So there's definitely no like black and white answer to this. Again, that's why I have notes, because there's a lot of variety to what to expect with labor and what you need to do based on your individual circumstance. So I just want to throw out there, number one, don't get stuck on your due date. It is completely just an estimate. It's kind of just a guess that's thrown out there. That's a pretty good idea about when you'll go in labor, but a lot of people do go past this date and a lot of people go before this date. So don't get your heart broken if that date comes and goes and you still haven't gone in labor. Kind of expect it to happen in that 40th week at some point. So I always just like to start with that. Anything after 37 weeks is typically considered full term. Where that if you showed up at the hospital, they're not going to try and stop your labor, they're going to just let you have the baby. So just kind of know that there's a lot of give on when you're going to have your baby, and again, people go past that due date, so don't have your heart broken. The other thing is that this is non-medical advice. If you have any concerns, you should always call your doctor, call your labor and delivery unit and see what they think that you should do. This information is kind of just based off of like collective ideas of what people have shared with me, what I've seen in my own work, and stories people have shared with me and friends and family. If you haven't seen my first video, I am a community-based doula. I work in Southern Illinois with Healthy Families Illinois for Shawnee Health, and I've been a doula for like a 1.5 years at this point, and a doula is a person who supports people in labor and delivery. So again, this is all kind of based off of what I've seen over my time, and then I also am a parent to 2 little kids and currently pregnant with my 3rd, so I also have my personal experience. So going back to this is non-medical advice, and trust your gut, trust your intuition. If something seems off to you, then you should go in and have it checked out. If I tell people all the time, if they're calling me about something that they're concerned about, if you're concerned enough to be calling me, then you probably should just go ahead and go in or call your doctor, because if you have enough kind of red flags going off that you're reaching out for support, then something might not be right, and you're going to be glad that you went in. If nothing's wrong, then great, you'll go home and you'll sleep better, and if something is wrong, then you're going to be glad that you went in when you did. So the other thing is, if you have a high-risk pregnancy, if you have anything going on that labels you high risk, or just any medical things that maybe you're not high risk but your doctor's kind of watching, go with what they tell you. Always go with what your provider tells you. This is definitely for sort of like low risk, full term, typical pregnancies. So for a person who thinks that they're having contractions and they suspect that they're in labor, the rule of thumb is typically 5-1-1. And 5-1-1 stands for contractions that are coming every 5 minutes, that are lasting for 1 minute each, and that's consistently happening for 1 hour. So there's no stopping it. You've sat down, you've drank some water, you've changed positions, you took a bath, whatever you did to maybe try to, you know, see what was going on, if it was just Braxton Hicks or something. If it continues to happen regularly, that's usually kind of a good time to go ahead and head into the hospital. Some people will say like 4-1-1 is a better rule of thumb. Some people say 5-1-1. The 5-1-1 comes directly from what is taught at the labor and delivery class, typically at SIH in Carbondale. But some people wait longer if they want to have a more natural experience and they're really trying to hold out. And some people go in sooner. Again, there's no right or wrong to this. It's just that 5-1-1 is kind of like the rule of thumb if you're consistently having contractions that close together. I would definitely recommend downloading now during your pregnancy to get an app that will time contractions for you. You are not going to have the mental capacity during labor to be, you know, trying to figure out what time your contraction started, when it ended, and when the next one begins. If you have a partner, someone that lives with you that can help you time them, that's really helpful. But go ahead and download the app now. A lot of times apps that are already being used for like counting kicks will also have a contraction timer. Timing contractions are kind of strange because you're not exactly timing like the way that you'd expect. You have a contraction start here and it happens in peaks from, say it's a minute long, and then it ends, and you have this dead space between, and then a new contraction starts. You're timing from when that first contraction started to when your second contraction starts, not the dead space between them. So if you have a minute long contraction with a minute space between and a new contraction starts, then your contractions are 2 minutes apart versus 1 minute apart. So that kind of helps people if they just get the app. It does that for you and you don't have to worry about it. But it's kind of weird to time them yourself, so that's why I recommend doing that. What do they feel like? What does a contraction feel like? That's probably the number one question people start to ask me towards the end of their labor or towards the end of their pregnancy. This is like a super tricky thing to answer. I would say that everyone describes it a little bit differently. Definitely the word tightening gets used a lot. You can physically feel the tightening on your belly. Some people have Braxton Hicks during their pregnancy pretty regularly, and so it's easy for them to sort of notice that tightening feeling. But you can physically feel this. So just touch your belly and it will get really hard, and that's a contraction. They cause, you know, some amount of pain. I don't like to use the word pain a lot. I think intensity is kind of a good way to think about it, because the more you get caught up on the pain, the more you sort of get scared, and the more you fear, the more tension you have. But when a contraction happens, it has a beginning and an end, and it's very clear when it has started and when it's over. Some people feel them more high up on their belly. Some people feel them lower down. Some people feel them in their back. I think back labor is something that throws a lot of people off. So that's something to sort of look out for. So the location has a lot of variety, and sometimes that changes during your progression of your labor. It might start off being in your belly, and then you might feel it in your back, and then it might go back to your belly. So, but it's definitely a tightening. It's definitely an intensity. It'll sort of consume you mentally. When labor really gets going, you are not going to be able to focus on anything except for your labor, except for getting through those contractions. So you're not going to be watching a movie. You're not going to be playing cards. You're not going to be having conversations. You're going to be very focused on getting through each one. So in the beginning, you might have a slower progression where it's kind of coming on slowly, and you might be able to have conversations and walk and do all these things. But as it gets closer together and more intense and the contractions get stronger and you no longer are doubting that you're in labor, you're not going to be chit-chatting with people. You're going to be very focused. So consuming is a word that I use. Like mentally, you're very consumed with dealing with your contractions. And I also talk about how it kind of takes your breath away. So some people, when they're having one, like it kind of becomes hard to breathe. This is where you see a lot of people breathing in videos during labor. That kind of helps keep you focused and keeps your oxygen going and keeps you breathing and relaxed versus tensing up and holding your breath and tightening. So definitely make sure to breathe, but you will feel like a feeling of your breath kind of being taken away. A lot of times if people are walking during labor, they have to stop to have a contraction as they're getting into the active labor phase rather than the early labor phase. Some labors start slow, like I said. Some people have contractions that are like 10, 15, 20 minutes apart consistently for a day or two, and then it really starts picking up from there. And so that does happen, and so that's just something to be aware of. Not everyone just goes into labor and is sure of it. But no matter what, kind of like the key is that consistency is what sort of is the difference between Braxton Hicks and labor. If you're having them every 5 minutes, every 7 minutes, every 9 minutes, every 2 minutes, whatever it is, it's consistently coming. They're not stopping. You're not sleeping through them. You're very much actively getting through each one. So we talked a little bit about Braxton Hicks. I think most people are pretty familiar with that term during pregnancy, but these are just practice contractions that your body goes through throughout your pregnancy. A lot of people with like not first-time moms will have more Braxton Hicks than a first-time mom will. These sometimes can be pretty painful and really similar to labor. They definitely are for me. The difference again is just that consistency. They don't happen as consistently as contractions. If anyone has any words or ways to describe how their labor felt or their contractions felt, I think it's really useful. I think one of the best things that you can do as a person in your first pregnancy is talk to other moms about what it was like for them when they went into labor, how they would describe contractions, how they knew that it was for sure labor. Hear their stories and listen, because there's so much variety. You kind of want to have an idea of what's out there. So that's kind of a piece of advice I have. And if anyone wants to comment any suggestions or words that they would use to describe it, I think that's helpful. The only way to be 100% sure that you are for sure in labor is to go to the hospital, and they're going to check your cervix, and they're going to tell you if your cervix is making change or not. So that's the only way to be like 100% sure I'm in labor. It's confirmed. They're admitting me to the hospital. So if you really need to hear that reassurance and know, go ahead and go in and get checked, and you'll know from there. And do not be embarrassed if you're sent home. Don't feel discouraged. Your labor is definitely going to be coming at some point. You're close. I think people are always worried they're going to get sent home, and that's totally not unusual at all. And it's, like I said, always better to go in and be sent home than not to go in at all. I want to just touch base on preterm labor. If anyone's before 37 weeks and they suspect labor, go into the hospital. You can try calling, you can call your provider, but typically they're going to want to see you, and they're going to want to see what's going on, because again, the only way to know is by checking your cervix. So that's not something to mess around with. You definitely want to be aware if you are in preterm labor. So if you're suspecting it, just go ahead and go in. The advice for waiting for the 511 and everything else is for a full term, 37 weeks and beyond pregnant women. The other thing I want to talk about is your water breaking. If you're having contractions, maybe they're like 8 minutes apart, and then your water breaks, things are probably going to intensify. So it's kind of a good time to go ahead and head into the hospital. Most providers want to know when your water breaks. There's, kind of like when your water breaks, things kind of go up to the next level. Baby's head's now right up on your cervix, so the intensity level is usually higher. So it's always just a good idea to go ahead and head in at that point for most people. You can talk to your provider and see what they want you to do if your water breaks. I think this is like what you see in all the movies, like someone's water breaks and it's like, oh, I'm for sure in labor if my water broke. Like if your water breaks, you're having a baby. But most people don't have a labor start off with their water breaking. Most people are going to have contractions and then at some point have their water breaks. However, it does happen. So if your water does break and you haven't had any contractions, your goal sort of becomes to get into labor at this point if you're full term. So you want to do what you can to get contractions going, because you're going to want to have the baby within, typically the rule of thumb is like 24 to 48 hours They want you to have a baby once your water has broken, and that's because your risk of infection is higher. Baby's nice and protected in like a bubble, and when that bubble breaks, they're not as protected. So again, most providers want you to call them and let them know if your water has broken, and they'll kind of give you some advice and some things to know. They want to make sure baby's moving like they should. Some doctors might want you to monitor your temperature for monitoring risk of infection, and nothing into the vagina once your water's broken. You don't want to put anything up in there because bacteria can go up. So, you know, no sex, no tampons, just use a pad, like, because your water will continue to come out. It's not like it just comes out one time and then that's it. It'll continue to trickle out. One of the number one things people ask me is, how do I know if my water broke? Some people have some issues with peeing sometimes, or a lot of discharge and stuff, and they can't tell. So my advice is usually, if you're not sure if your water has broken, number one, you can go into the hospital and they'll swab you, and that swab will turn a color if it is your water. Number two, you can put a pad on. You can lay down for like maybe 30 minutes, and when you stand back up, more water will come out whenever you stand up. So like I said, it keeps coming out, and when you lay down, it kind of pools inside you. And when you stand up, it comes out, and then you have a pad on to catch it, and you can kind of look at it and see, you know, does it look like urine, you know, or is it looking like it is your water? Is it continuing to come out, and everything else? So, so if your water's broken, you're full term, you want to get your labor going, you haven't had any contractions yet, you've talked to your provider, they're okay with you waiting at home to get things going, go on a walk and do anything you can to get oxytocin going. So a lot of times I tell clients, maybe try using your breast pump or doing some nipple stimulation to get oxytocin going, to get some contractions coming. Your other alternative is just to go ahead and head into the hospital. If your water's broken, you're going to get admitted regardless of how much your cervix has made. And then they're just going to probably give you some Pitocin to get things going at some point. And so if you're okay with getting Pitocin, you're okay with that experience, then go ahead and go in and do that too. Like, that's always an option for people. I just typically work with people that are kind of more on the holistic side, that are trying to avoid medications and epidurals and stuff. So we try and talk about some natural ways. The acronym TACO is kind of the last thing I want to share with you guys. That's related to your water breaking as well. T stands for the time, so you should let your provider know what time your water broke. Again, this is because they want you to have your baby within a certain amount of time from when your water has broken because of that risk of infection. A is for the amount. Is it a little trickle or is it a huge gush? The C and the O is for color and odor. So usually it's clear and doesn't really have a strong smell. If it has a funny color to it or a strange smell, that sometimes can mean that baby passed meconium. Meconium is baby's first poop. So sometimes that can be a sign of distress for babies, so they might be more likely to have you come into the hospital if it's not clear or if it has a strange smell to it. So remember TACO, and again, you're going to always be monitoring your baby for movement and making sure that they're acting the way that they always have been, especially if your water's broken. So I think I just kind of want to end with saying, in general, a reason to go to the hospital other than labor is going to be decreased movement from your baby. Most people kind of have an idea of, you know, what's typical for their baby's movement each day. Are they moving? Are they more active in the morning, or are they more active in the evening, or whatever time of day? Maybe there's a certain way that you lay down, or a certain thing that you eat or drink that really gets them moving. Kind of pay attention to those things, and definitely be paying attention to it in the last month of your pregnancy, and definitely the last trimester. You want to recognize if something seems off or if something seems different to you. That's always a great reason to go in for decreased fetal movement. They're going to just put you on the monitors and make sure everything's okay. Again, most likely everything is, and you're just going to be glad you went in and everything's good. And if it's not, then it's going to be great that you went in and can see what's going on before anything happens. So the other thing is bleeding. Some people do have some bleeding during labor from their cervix, and it'll typically be like this bright red color. No matter what, if you see bleeding, you should go to the hospital. You don't know where it's coming from. It could be coming from your placenta. You know, it could also just be coming from your cervix and not a big deal, so stay calm about it. I've definitely had multiple clients that started having contractions, and as their cervix was opening, their cervix bled a little bit and it looks kind of like, you know, a period. But you need to get it checked out. So go ahead and go in if you have any bleeding, really at any point in pregnancy. That's typically the rule of thumb. If it's, you know, if it is just from your cervix and the doctor's not concerned about it and you're not at a point where you really want to be at the hospital yet in your labor, they will let you go home and you can come back whenever you're ready, you know, to really be there if you're wanting, again, the more holistic experience. So don't feel like you're trapped at the hospital once you show up. So I think that's everything. Again, this is non-medical advice. I'm just sharing sort of the rule of thumb from what I've learned from people and my own experiences, my family's, my friend, and everything else. Haley's asking me if I have any app recommendations for timing contractions. And I totally do, but since I'm using my phone to do this right now, I can't see what it's called. But whenever we post this and upload it out, I will include what I use. I really don't think you can go wrong though. They're pretty simple. But I think it's always nice to have someone tell you what they use and what's worked well. So I will definitely put that in there. I meant to actually write that down earlier, Haley. Next week we are gonna do, so me and my coworker Chastity, one of my doulas, we're gonna do this together. We're gonna social distance, wear masks, and we're gonna meet in our office. And I think we're gonna do like a what to put in your hospital bag, what to bring to the hospital kind of thing, like a demonstration a little bit. And also talk about just like what's already in the room for you that you don't need to worry about bringing, where you can find things in the hospital room. This is something that we usually are able to help with because we're there with clients at the hospital and we can show people where the pads are, where the ice packs are, you know, that you can like adjust the temperature in the room and stuff like that. So we're going to try and kind of hit on some of those things for people since we can't be with clients right now. So that's next week with Chastity. And we are going to do it on Thursday at 4 o'clock instead of Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So next week will be Thursday at 4 and we will post that as well. So yeah, thanks for joining today, guys. This is Conversations with a Doula, and I will see you next week with Chastity on Thursday at 4 o'clock. Thank you.